Before I begin, let me just ask my questions. Let me just say that in those 21 years, I always realized that every day you learn more, or you hear things a little differently. For instance, listening to the gentleman, says he goes back and he hears from farmers, and he hears from people who are drilling for oil or whatever, gas and so on. I don't have in the South Bronx any oil wells, and I don't have any farmers. We enjoy the results of the hard work they do, but I don't. But on the other hand, in looking for a balance in how we deal with the EPA and all that, I have the highest asthma rates in the nation. And so I know that people want, yes, whatever balance we need to strike, but not to go back into the days when the air in New York was totally, totally, totally polluted. I also have a river, and for most people, you have a river in the middle of the Bronx, yes, the Bronx River. A great name for it. And most of you live in communities where rivers and ponds and waterways are just a way that you even take for granted. Well, that the whole community worked on cleaning up that river, and that river became a very special place, is so important. And EPA played a major role in making sure that fish came back to the river and animal life in the neighboring area that didn't exist before. And so again, to some may say, well, that's a little melodramatic, but in the middle of a city with a lot of cement, that's extremely important. And so as we look forward to the balance of not hurting industry, we also have to make sure that we don't move back on the advances we've made. And that's just my comment. Thank you so much for your work and for your service. And I know the next couple of years will be rough ones, but we all stand here ready to assist you in any way we can. As you know, I have been actively involved in working with the EPA on finding ways to address the public health impacts of PCBs in both window caulking and light ballast in our schools. This past week, New York City announced that it is moving forward with a 10-year plan to remove and replace all PCB-contaminated light ballasts throughout the entire school system. So I have three quick questions. Based on current science and the EPA guidance that was issued in December 2010 on PCB-contaminated light ballasts, do you think that in order to protect our school children, that the city needs to resolve this problem sooner than the announced 10-year time period? Secondly, as you know, separately from the light fixture problem, there's also an immediate and real concern about the PCBs contained in window caulking in our schools. Could you please take a moment to update me on your efforts to have New York City also address this issue as well? When the safety of our children is at risk, we cannot afford any further delays. And lastly, is this something that's in the inner city, in New York more than other places, or is this an issue affecting the nation as a whole?
Well, thank you. I'll start, Mr. Serrano, for your with your last question, because I had just written down that this is not a New York City only issue. It has to do with the basically the generation of the building. So to very quickly summarize, PCBs, polychlorinated biphenyls, cancer-causing. They're found in ballasts, in fluorescent lights, old fluorescent lights. They can be found in caulk. They were a component of caulk until they were phased out beginning in the 1970s, I believe. And so I do think that we were gratified to see the city's announcement that they are going to move forward to address the ballast issue. The reason that came to be is that the city had signed up to do an investigation of PCB in caulk because PCB was showing up in air. And they came to understand, I think, through very quick sampling, that the bigger problem might well be these PCBs in the ballast. The ballasts get old, they start to leak, and PCBs can be a concern. So I think our next move is to meet with the city and encourage them to 10 years is certainly, I think, part of their budgetary impetus. And they're looking at, to their credit, an energy efficiency and sort of updating revamp that would be beneficial to the schools in terms of their operating costs. So they may well be able to do this work, replace the lights and the balance, and it may well be able to pay for itself or nearly pay for itself over time. We're going to encourage them to focus on the places where we think there's contamination, leaking, so that we don't have some child, God forbid, or teacher who ends up being on the 10-year side of that. We'd like to at least get some assurance that they're triaging this situation. But I do think that it's been a tremendous step forward. The city in general has been dealing with this issue. Other areas around the country, and we now have guidance up on our internet site. It's not a regulation, it's not a requirement to help school districts who are dealing with either caulk or PCBs.
Well, you answered the last question, which was I was going to ask you, has the city been cooperative, and you feel that they have. Do you still, well, maybe you don't feel that they have. So let me ask you a question. Has the city been cooperative in moving ahead on this? And again, do you 10 years may be a budget a piece, but can we wait 10 years? Should this be dealt with at a much quicker pace?
I think when you're talking about a health issue, especially one that's a children's health issue, young bodies still developing, we don't have a lot of data on how pollution or toxics affect them more or less than adults. Urgency is always called for. I have not been dealing with the city in day-to-day negotiations. I will suffice it to say that where they are now is a good thing. They have stepped up after some period of time to say we now know and understand that we need to be aggressive here, and I don't think we should discount that. And our goal now is to ensure that they improve even their 10-year plan, which is a wonderful improvement and a step forward to try to make it as effective as it can, always with children in mind, always with children and doing it within their budget. I mean, the city schools have their own set of challenges, and the mayor and officials are quick to point that out, and so we're trying to help them deal with this issue in a way that's protective, but also mindful.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Flake.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ms. Jackson. The theme seems